All right, we are live for a little midday wise talk, and I have Trader Steph joining us momentarily. Mr. George has some things to do, and Mr. Allen has some Mother's Day things. So today is going to be just a relaxed, laid back, open the microphones up, or open the telephone lines up, and just find out what's going on with you guys. And I got a couple of things I want to touch on. And actually, me and Trader Steph was talking just a moment ago about just the complacency amongst the population here and anticipating or lack of anticipation of this next or what's going to be considered probably the second wave that might sweep through here in the weeks or months ahead that would really cause us to have to reflect on the reopening process. And so we're going to go down that route. But before I dive any further, let me make sure everything is rolling smoothly on my end. Let me know if what's going on in the chat. And also feel free to just ask any questions, share your 2 cents or whatever you want to talk about. And so I'm going to include everybody in today's discussion. So we got Mr. Teles says vote blue. Okay. We got Shade. We got Shad. No. Yeah. Okay. Spirit King. DD Prepper. We got Shane. Truth or Nothing. What up, everyone? So how's everybody doing this afternoon? Here in the great state of Michigan. It's extremely cold, a little snow, sprinkles in the air. Not ideal Michigan week, but it is what it is. And so I want to actually, pull up this here because several people have mentioned it now, and I just had a chance to actually look at it. And it's very vague, and it's not too thoroughly laid out. But I'm going to pull it up on my screen here. And as I mentioned, Trader Steph will be joining me momentarily. And we're going to go from there. But here's something I think people, I ain't going to that link. All right, here. So I'll pop that up. And so here is an act that was just, just this past week, HR 666. It's called the Testing, Reaching, and Contacting Everyone Act. And so something just threw out there in the House. And I'm not sure if it's officially passed, but it's something that will be thrown out there in regards to testing and something about mobilizing, providing funds and grants for states to begin testing more so. So a lot of people, I guess, were asking or wanting me to share my thoughts on it. And so just glancing through this initial bill, it's literally like it's beyond vague to where it doesn't really do any justice as far as what's looking to be what they're looking to accomplish with this. But outside of it's literally not even probably a page long. And so it's one of those things where they're just finding ways to allocate funds towards another direction. Wait until okay, sounds good. So just talking back and forth with stuff. All right, so just the first line here says the Secretary of Health and Human Services, acting through the Director of Centers for Disease and Control, may award grants to eligible entities. So that right there is something that is very interesting. What type of entities are you referring to? It should be towards hospitals or states but entities lets me know that it can be going to some people we may not want the funds to go to conduct diagnostic testings for this current situation, to trace and monitor the contacts of infected individuals and to support the quarantine of such contacts. So just that right there, to trace and to monitor those that have been infected. So as a part of this, everybody get tested. We want more tests. Now this particular act here gives the right to start gathering that data and gathering that information to probably start putting people in certain databases. So I'd imagine those entities that are referred to here, the grants to those entities, might be a part of the whole established order to really begin ramping up that data system that I know that they so badly want to put everyone in. And so very interesting. So I appreciate those for bringing that to my attention. And so let me find out what's going on in the chat. Let me hear what do you guys want to touch on? We can definitely go that way. I just got in the chat. We got snow in May. Yeah, very funny. We don't know enough about the V word. Very true. And so one thing we do know is that like in any prior experiences we've had, the best comparison it would be to war. There's always casualties of wars, and then we have the military industrialized complex, which is all the people who stand to profit, which happen to be all the major corporations that create weaponry and create all the tools used to continue the wars. And so now I think, they've clearly admitted that we're in a time of war against an invisible enemy, but yet the battlefield is different. The battlefield is every country around the world is faced with it. The casualties of war happen to be the people that's lost their life, and then the so-called heroes will be all the governing bodies that are working on our behalf to bring us testing and treatments and the V word, of course. But yet there's more than 100 companies or 100 different entities that are now all vying for funding to bring out that first vaccine. And so clearly that the pharmaceutical industry will be the beneficiaries of all this funding and all this stuff, these grants and whatnot from these type of bills that will be rolled out. And so it's the industrialized complex of the pharmaceutical industry now, as opposed to all the other entities that actually create the tanks and the bombs and the missiles and all that other stuff. So same structure, different war is basically what I'm getting at. Says I don't vote for party or color. I vote based on candidates, value system, and actions in the past. Joel, that would be very, and that I would say that's the way that it should be done. But at this current moment, I think that all parties, all political figures, for the most part, have been compromised in some form or fashion, and they're all, on the same team. I believe. I don't think that the left right can bring anything different other than the same thing. And as we witnessed, and as I talked about last night, with this new stimulus that's being thrown out there, left and right will have to go for it, because if they do not go for it, they won't be able to further their agenda by doing things like this, where they're funding all these entities that track and trace us. But then also, it's going to be hard for the central bankers or the banking industry to continue to create all these SBA loans and PPP programs and all these lending windows where while the people know that all those billions are going directly into the same hands of the people who cause the problems. So they're going to have to provide a little bit of some type of care to the people so the people just don't get flat out pissed. Like, it's a great distraction tool, I believe, to be able to offer somebody up to $10,000 a month and be able to shuffle billions into the financial sector. So let me see here. We got Trader Steph. How you doing?
What's going on?
It's slow motion. Just starting my rant a little bit, and so
train wreck, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not your rant, but the situation we're in. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, so Trader Steph is joining us, and I think maybe, I'm not sure if Ben is joining us, but whatnot. We're going to just go and have some fun with it. But Steph, I was talking about how somebody or several people now have mentioned, I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at it, but I'll put it up on the screen here.
Yes,
it's that HR 666. And so I was just thumbing through that, sharing my little 2 cents on that.
Nice.
Do you mind chiming in and sharing your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I will. Where do you start? Because there's a lot of people here in the room, and I'm sure there's lots of different opinions and points of view. And I'm not for this bill at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with, does anyone in the room or anyone here know? I do, but I want to share it with you. I want to feel this out for a minute. Mm-hmm. This current virus is SARS 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
They finally decided to name it. And it wasn't a coincidence that I named it SARS 2.0, the first article I wrote on January 21st, I think. Does anyone here know why SARS didn't blow out and mutate and travel around the world? Is anyone familiar with that story?
Let me see. Do I okay, I'm not well versed. I'll let you continue on. And I'll see if you in the chat.
Anybody out there in the chat know why the original SARS-1 did not become a global pandemic? Because this is very important with the relation to this bill. And I'm stressing I am not supportive of this bill. And I may be giving away my answer here. But back with SARS in 2002 and 2003, which this particular virus is a mutation of, and that's confirmed by the gene sequences, was containment and tracing. That's why. because it was identified early, and they basically put a ring around it. I think the deaths total for SARS were either 300 or 600. Sorry, I don't remember the exact number, but we were doing that in less than a day in New York City at one point, right? So SARS was peanuts, but the point was it had the potential. If anyone remembers, it's close to 20 years ago. It's when I bought my first masks. Was containment and tracing. So that presents a dilemma for us because, number one, we're already in the pandemic. Forget the plandemic. Forget it. Just close your mind off here for a minute and forget about everything that you think you know, because we don't know much at all, quite frankly. We only know what we're being told or shared, right? So that can be a problem. But when it comes to a virus, my dad died from a bacteria, which eventually the co-infections killed him after 2 years. So I'm kind of familiar on one level of what it's like to have to deal with a family member and be in PPE just to visit. I mean, luckily I was able to visit him through his bouts of MRSA. But with a virus, it doesn't give a damn about your politics. It doesn't care about your money. It doesn't care about your opinion. It doesn't care about your science. You know, I can go down the whole list. It really doesn't care, right? And I think people really need to internalize that fact and remember the science is not an answer to the virus. The virus already existed. Science is just a lag effect of trying to provide some answers to it, right? So if we take the influenza virus, for instance, it's been going on for decades. You know, that original one came in from southern China, the Guangdong province. And that's where this gene sequence actually traces to. Doesn't mean it physically started there, but they could have taken a sample from the Guangdong province, which they were doing, took it to a lab, and then it got released out of that lab, right? I mean, there's so many possibilities here. I don't want to go down that route, really, because there's just too much bullshit out there. So let's just stick with influenza for a minute and think about the shot. Because everyone's thinking, oh, there's going to be a vaccine, blah, blah, blah. Well, the vaccine on influenza is only like 10% effective because the virus continues to mutate. So by the time they come up with the new vaccine for the new year and they begin producing it, it's actually too late. So we're in the same boat with this particular virus because it's not the flu. It's the cold virus. It's the common cold, guys and girls. And we've never developed a vaccine for a cold. It's really difficult to do that. There was never a vaccine developed for SARS. But let me just throw this out there. It's not like this is some kind of surprise that this happened. We've known it was going to happen. The same way we've got the superbugs with bacterias. It was going to happen with a virus sooner or later. It's been talked about for 2 decades. I mean, I could go on and on about this. It's sad. So here we are. We've already went through a lockdown. It's a pandemic in the world. People can argue all the points they want to make about the deaths and compared to this and that. It's irrelevant when you're standing next to someone who died. Who was a family member. Or one matter of fact, you couldn't even go visit them.
I actually have a friend. I actually had a friend and his father, passed last week, and it was all, I was informed that it was COVID related, but don't know the details of it. But he's a younger man, so definitely hit me kind of hard because I didn't anticipate on getting a text late night saying that my man had passed. So yeah,
it's a killer, and it's going to touch everybody in this room in one way, shape, or form. Don't think that you're immune to it because you ain't. And that's the problem with this virus because the population is naive to it. And I'm not talking about their point of view, but the body, the host, we're naive to it. It's new. It's novel, right? That's what new means. There's probably not going to be a cure. If they come up with a vaccine in less than a year that they're in a trial with, I'll be highly surprised given that the cold flu the cold virus has been around for since we've been on this planet, right? And all of a sudden they're going to come up with a vaccine in 12 to 18 months. Good luck with that. Because I haven't had the yearly flu vaccine since my teenage years.
Yeah.
And I've only had the flu once. I'm not going to tell you what my age is, but I'm just too old. There's, what's more important is getting your sound like I'm on a soapbox here. I'm sorry. Is your immune system, because this thing is very particular. It's going to attack the weak.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to deal with your immune system. Keep it as strong as you can. Beware of the scams.
Mm-hmm.
You got to social distance, and you got to be aware of the potential for the infection. And even if it's not really going to hurt you that much, or you're subclinical or asymptomatic and didn't even know it, whatever,
mm-hmm.
you're still can pass it on to other people. So, there's another thing I want to mention. The whole antibodies thing is bullshit. Excuse my French.
It's all good.
Because this virus, I gave you a link, by the way. It's in the chat. You can send that out to everybody in the public chat if you're able to. Are you able to do that?
Let me grab it, and I'll actually. Can I pull it up on the screen?
Yeah, but don't play it. It's not a picture; it's an audio. So It's something that they would have to be able to copy paste.
All right, so I'll put this link in the chat right now. So that's
an audio from. Let me just tell you a little bit about him, and I'm not being his soapbox,
mm-hmm.
believe me, because I don't like his politics at all. I really do not like his politics.
mm-hmm.
But sometimes you need to separate the politics from the facts.
Yeah.
And the guy means well. And what I did, he's been doing interviews every night, Monday through Friday, since the first week of January.
Mm-hmm.
And I was cued into him back with SARS and Ebola.
What's his name?
Henry Nyman, PhD virologist, 45 years experience.
All right, I'll try to pull it. Is there what's his website? What's his website?
He's got a website, but it's called Recombinamics.com. But I'll give you the link in the chat that you can send out. He hasn't updated the website that he had. It's the company he has. It's
mm-hmm.
like him. It's just him. But now he's transferred it over to a forum.
Okay.
And there's no monetary thing involved here.
Yeah.
Just sits around and he reads the gene sequences as they come out. So the thing about the that audio, I went in and I edited it because it's Jeff. Anyone familiar with Jeff Rentz?
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Rentz drives me nuts sometimes. So I edited out the introduction
mm-hmm.
and I simply put together all the things that through that hour. So that's a 36-minute audio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all the important points where he's strictly sticking to the science of what's going on. And it's not everything because there's so much to cover, but as far as being contemporary about it in real time with the things that are being talked about, he hit some points there that will clarify a lot of questions for people out there, I think.
Yeah.
But those antibodies, this virus is using the antibodies to get into the cells. And it's not like this is something new.
Mm-hmm.
Viruses do that. And I think that's something that a lot of people are getting confused about. Like with the heart attacks, that's myocarditis. That's a common co-infection that people get from influenza. You hear about kids dropping dead on the basketball court.
Yeah.
Years ago, some of them had the flu and didn't know it, and they end up having a heart attack. But it's something that's documented and runs through the hospital system ever since the flu has been around. It's not specific to this virus. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. But this particular strain, the last thing I'll say about it, the first so-called documented case, which now we know was probably going back to October,
mm-hmm.
maybe even September, with the gene sequences being traced into Guangdong province, the southern province, which is where the 1918 flu came from,
mm-hmm.
by the way. That sequence came from Wuhan with an ORF8. There's a thing called an ORF8 mutation, and there are 3 other things. And I don't want to get into virology because I'm not a virologist, but it kind of stuck in my head. Yeah. That's what identified the first case in Washington.
Really?
So what happened was, while we were worried about the West Coast and China, what was coming in the back door on the East Coast
mm-hmm.
was the Italian lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a large Asian population that lived and worked in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that big soccer game in Milan that people, soccer is a very popular sport, particularly in South America, for instance.
It's the biggest.
Biggest. And everybody was at this big soccer match in Milan. I don't know how many people were in that stadium. Anyone's familiar with that? 20, 30,000 people. When they left that stadium, they not just from that particular soccer match, but they were coming aside from the soccer match, flying into New York, flying to Brazil. Brazil was the first documented case in South America, all over the world. And that's the Italian lineage. And it turned out there was something about when it got into Italy, it mutated to something much more virulent. And that's why Italy got hit so hard. And people are giving a lot of reasons out there, this and this and that. But look, you got to eliminate all the noise. And when you look at the gene sequences, it's the mutation in the sequence that makes it more virulent. It's kind of like any Bitcoin folks out there. It's like the blockchain. This is a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's like, because with the blockchain, you can trace back all the transactions. It's a permanent record. You can go back to where it started, right?
Yeah.
Supposedly. The gene sequence is the same way. That's why people are doing genealogy.com or whatever to find out who their relatives are from wherever, where'd you come from? So it's the same science. It's not something you can really debate or have an opinion about. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't care about you. It's just, here it is. So that Italian lineage came into the East Coast and it started spreading up and down the East Coast, and New York got hit really hard. And now I've been forwarding out Nyman's tweets because the guy, I don't know how old he is. I think he's in the 70s maybe. But he's just sitting around all day looking at the gene sequences, Yeah. And he's seeing that the lineage is taking over the world. So as you've noticed, Russia's now getting hit because at first it was kind of like not so bad, but now the gene sequences are coming out. They're all Italian lineage. Alaska, Italian lineage. South America, Italian lineage. All across the United States, it's all Italian lineage. And here's the issue. Because of those antibodies, there's so much virus out there. That means you probably got more than one strain in your body.
Yeah.
It's not just one, because there's so many strains out there now. So just think that through for a minute. When you've got all these viruses in one host, and the Italian strain is now the dominant strain, not only is it fighting the host, but it's fighting all the other strains to take over, and it's winning. It's taking over. It's getting stronger. That makes it more feasible for it to recombine into a even more virulent. It's the perfect petri dish to go another step further. So that's the concern. You're beginning to see some peeps out there in the mainstream about there's a new mutation. It ain't new.
Yeah. Now watch this. Before we went live, we were talking about how the reopening process. And so we have a lot of states, the southern states are reopening and adjusting to the new norm down in those areas. And so basically I think that people are taking taking it very lightly, the threat of a second wave, which I believe it's inevitable, it's bound to come anyway, just because most of the states that are reopening were not hit as hard or severely as the northern states that were, dealing with large cases. So what do you think that second wave will look like, and how much further will government cramp down on us by passing HR 666 and all types of other things that might be coming?
I don't know, and I don't think anybody can really tell you for sure.
Yeah.
Because my hope, and the virus don't care about your hopes, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't. It wants to survive. It wants to duplicate, multiply, and live, right? Doesn't care about my hopes, but I hope it just burns out. But that's really unlikely, because keep in mind, they got that first estimate of 100 to 200,000. And that was with a lockdown for the first wave.
Yeah.
But with a lockdown, it was into the millions. Without a lockdown, it would be in the millions. Well, they reduced it down to 60,000. Well, when did we pass 60,000? And now let's just talk United States.
Yeah.
We're almost to 80,000 right now. We're not even out of the first week of May. So let's do the math, and this is going to lead into your question. There's an average of anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 a day dying in the United States. Give or take a few hundred in either direction, depending on what day of the week. Do the math. Now that's steady. That's where the curve has flattened at the top. It's just flat up there. It's just sitting there and it's flat.
Yeah.
So we're staying steady here. Give it another 20 days, that's another 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be at 120,000. We're probably going to be somewhere between 1 and 140 when all is said and done through the summer, if not more, with just the current first wave. So the second wave, what's going to happen? Well, this thing's out there mutating. The Italian lineage is taking over the rest. The particulars about this virus of how the cleavage site attaches to the cells is using the antibodies of other cells. And that's nothing new or nothing like novel. That's what viruses do. There's even a name for it, and it's in that audio for you guys.
Yeah.
Take that all into consideration. It just doesn't look good at all. And I think it's going to be worse, all things considered, based on what we know right now and what we've seen. Yeah. And based on history, the only way to we can't contain it now. I don't know if anybody remembers, but in the early stage in February, during those White House conferences, they were saying there was a difference between mitigation and containment. Mm-hmm. And early on, we were in the containment mode.
Yeah.
And then they switched over to mitigation because there was no way to contain it. Now we got to mitigate.
Yeah. I want to put something. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I want to put this on a screen here. This is from this is Governor Whitmer here in Michigan. This is her Safe Start plan to reengage our economy. And so here's the 6 phases of this current pandemic we're experiencing, and we're currently in phase 3, the flattening. And so we have number 6 as a post-pandemic. Now, based upon the information you just shared, right, and there being a possible second wave that could be a lot worse. Yeah. So it's basically good to say that I mentioned this last night. I don't see us getting back to a post-pandemic time frame no time soon, and therefore all the things that will not be able to reopen, but more than likely we'll be going backwards. Would you also agree with that? With this second wave, it might be a little more intense, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it has already seeded the world, and the reason why it moved so quickly was because of air travel.
Yeah,
that's the difference between the 1918 pandemic and this one. Gene sequences aside, right? It's just modern technology and how we live today. So just the fact that it's seeded through the whole planet in a matter of just a few months, there's so much virus out there. You can't get around that fact right now. Mm-hmm. Borders don't matter anymore. So it's out there and it's going to mutate because that's what it does. Yeah. So how bad it's going to be, nobody knows. Maybe it'll just be kind of like the same of what we got, because this has allowed us to prepare, right? I mean, that's the good news about this. We know what to expect and what we can and cannot do. Because look, there's actually more deaths in Sweden per capita than all of the border countries around them. Despite the divergence in the way they went about it, they didn't shut down their economy, but the deaths are actually higher. So look, there's a trade-off no matter which way you go. And generally it's not an issue until it's in your own backyard. And then suddenly you want to do something about it, or you get pissed, right? Or somebody complains, oh, prison's not going to my neighborhood. So it's, once again, I think we're back to when it touches you personally, it's a different story. Yeah. But shutting down the whole economy, I mean, that has its own consequences with people and suicide and loss of employment. There's really no good answer here.
Yeah.
And to think that you can just walk around and ignore it, that it's not occurring, I think that's got more to do with being human.
Yeah.
We're kind of, we don't want to deal with our own mortality. We would rather rationalize it away that we're not in charge, really.
Yeah.
You know, because with modern technology, I think we kind of fool ourselves to thinking that we can control things. Oh, we can control the weather and we can fix the planet. It's like, you know what? Get a grip, because there comes a point in time where Mother Nature is just a lot smarter than we are, no matter how far ahead of the curve we are. So I think point I'm getting at, I think we'll be able to mitigate better in the fall. So that might be our saving grace.
Yeah. Now let's transition a little bit to the economy And as a result of the response that every government's actually rolling out there, I did a video last night about the new stimulus plan that's coming out, or they're trying to rush that through, 2,000 per kid, 2,000 per adult, all that stuff like that, and the PPP. And so where do we stand on that? So it's good to say if this is the first wave, and it might die down, but then it's going to be even worse the second wave. So we should anticipate more PPP loans and SB and all types of open lending windows and all those facilities they setting up, times 10 then, huh?
Yeah, well, one issue begets the next.
Yeah.
There's like no way you're going to avoid it. And so at the same time, it's bringing in the, however you want to call it, everyone's got their own name, so I'm not going to give one.
Yeah.
But the legislation that you're putting out there is one example. And then guaranteed income, universal income. It's got its pros and cons, but we live in a republic. This is not a socialist state or a communist state. I mean, I think we got some politics going on that's going that direction. And I think they're taking advantage of this crisis in order to further that agenda.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but they're going to do something no matter what. It's kind of, if you think of the 2008 financial crisis, 2008 and 9, the Fed had to do what it had to do at the time. If you were in it and exposed to what was going on in the inner workings of banking, that level of depression, and the bankruptcy laws wouldn't have mattered at that time.
Yeah.
The world would have shut down. It would have been worse than what we're dealing with right now in this moment without a virus. It actually worked, but they knew that it was a Band-Aid, right? It wasn't the solution, but it was the fix to plug the hole to try to get things back on track. And, the economy just kind of floated for 10 years. It really didn't outperform. Real estate went up, the stock market went up. That's where the inflation went. It didn't go really anywhere else to any great degree. But I can't argue that there wasn't any at the grocery store, for instance, but I think it's obvious that it went into real estate and it went into the stock market. Yeah. So how is that going to affect our economy going forward? And universal income and the PPP, look, I would guess about half of the businesses are either going to file for bankruptcy or not go into business at all. Because it's going to be a lag effect, just like, for instance, when you've got 2,000 to 3,000 people being diagnosed per day, that's a lag effect because they were just probably infected 2 weeks or 3 weeks prior. And with those that were just diagnosed, there's going to be another 2 to 3 week lag time where the 10% of them roughly will die.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing right now, when you still got deaths in the 1,500 to 3,000 range per day, just in the United States, we got at least another 2 to 3 weeks of that. No matter what happens, that's just the math. So the whole economy thing's a lag time too. So what the Fed has already done, we're not really going to see that effect in the economy until 6 months to a year down the road.
Damn.
Right? That's also a lag effect. Yeah. Just like inflation is a lag effect. Just like the layoffs and how the companies are impacted on their books, that's going to be a lag effect. So now we're just beginning to see some of the companies roll over with bankruptcy who were on the edge to begin with.
Yeah.
J.C. Penney, right?
Yeah.
Who else? You could probably name a few.
Now watch this. When it comes to the banking sector, I've had more than enough people come through the show and share their thoughts on how it's just a matter of time for, like, I guess, the lagging effect for all the losses that's being taken by the banks when it comes to people not paying their credit cards and not mortgages and all those things that's not being paid right now, basically because of the shutdown is being the excuse. So basically, could we be seeing the consequences of that for the banking sector? I mean, it's already underway now, but the true numbers being given out the next quarter or before the end of this year is out, to where we see more central bank, window opening opportunities for the banking purposes solely.
Anyone familiar with Lacey Hunt?
I am not.
My most recent article that's up on my website, which, by the way, my domain now is tradersteph.com.
Oh, you traded it. You changed it, huh?
Yeah, I upgraded it.
All right.
But on my most recent post, on the bottom, with Macro Voices, they brought in Lacey Hunt. Older guy, really smart, been around a long time. He's one of those folks that he keeps a low profile, so it's rare he comes out with interviews.
Yeah.
He's got a few out there lately. But I actually think the United States banking sector is actually going to do pretty well this time. Now, that's not a given. There's a big difference here between contagion, like derivatives, for instance. Let's say Deutsche Bank, which they've already blown up. Quite frankly. It's like a slow leak. That's another story. But as far as this particular hit, I think, because if you look at the banking stocks at the prices, just the banking stocks, they've actually weathered this storm better than most, with the exception of the NASDAQ, which is the technology index, right? I don't think we're going to have the problem in banking that we had in 2008 and 2009. But I think what's going to occur is the global currency reset. It's going to come a little bit sooner than expected, but they can't. There's too much chaos going on right now. To even consider that right now. It's just like, forget about it. Let's just print as much as we need. Let's just do what we need to get through this, and when we get through the other end, then we'll fix it. But what people think fixing is going to be, it's not going to be as the system currently exists. And how that's going to end up is anybody's guess. And I think anybody tells you exactly how it's going to be or work out, it's just a wild guess.
But watch this. But can we say it will be more steered towards a solely digital realm, as opposed to actually giving the people an opportunity to having some physical property, something they can feel in the form of paper, perhaps, or a transition slowly into something solely digital?
Well, there's going to be two sides of that coin. Just like we've got, politics have been polarized in this country since at least the 2000 election, right? I mean, when it became very obvious that it was very polarized, if my memory serves me right. That topic is kind of the same, because on one side of the fence, we got the transhumanists. Well, you want to go stick your brain in the computer and you think that's immortality? Good luck with that. Wait till somebody pulls the plug, you know? I think I got something that's much more beautiful and long lasting than that. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. So digital money. There's a room. There's a place. I mean, we're already digital, for God's sakes. We've been digital since the 80s. I mean, how long have you been using debit cards and credit cards? Give me a break. We're digital, and there's much more efficient systems and transaction systems available to us today than, say, crypto. Okay. Crypto right now is primarily speculative. And that's fine. I got nothing against that. That's your thing. But as far as the future and money and being all digital, my personal opinion is, if we become a space-faring planet, that's where it has a real utility. But when we're here on the Earth, you know, there's always going to be some form of barter or transactions that will be conducted with a physical form of money, whatever you think that may be. That's just the way it's been for thousands of years. And there's got to be some kind of medium of exchange between people to balance the scales, you know? Between my strawberries and your apple pie. How many strawberries am I supposed to get for your cherry pie? Well, I don't know. Well, let's just put a price on it. You see, there's got to be a medium of exchange. So there'll be digital and there will be a hard currency. How that's going to end up, you know, I don't know. But I don't think we're going full digital anytime in the near future. It's just not feasible for so many reasons.
Here's a question from Jesse. Says, who will back up the Fed in this Main Street / Wall Street crisis once the Treasury collapses?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Jim Rickards tries to answer that because who's going to bail out the central banks?
Yeah.
All right. Because now, I mean, their balance sheet is at 6.7, and it's probably higher than that.
Yeah.
They're probably going to reach 10 before the end of the summer.
Yeah. But watch this. I heard Jerome Powell mention when he was asked a question, how much higher can it go? And he said currently, based upon something GDP, the current Fed balance sheet is only 30%, to where there's still lots of room for them to expand their balance sheet.
Right. Hey, just for somebody out there in the public chat, you
Yeah.
want something for really good barter? 25-pound bags of sea salt. Never thought of that one, did you? It doesn't have a shelf life.
25-pound bag. Let's see what hell you get sea salt from a 25 pounds bag.
Just the size of the bag, it's a lot cheaper. And sea salt has all the trace minerals in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very healthy salt. It's very barterable, for instance.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just a thought out there. But back to the Fed. Yeah, that balance sheet's a mess. And they're not going to be able to unload it because, look, the plan was with the initial blow up to $4.5 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
We thought they had hoped that the economy would prove, not just the economy, but the global GDP and the financial system would recover to such a degree over at least 5 to 10 years that they would be able to liquidate and resell those assets that they purchased and put on their balance sheet, which they marked to fantasy rather than marked to market. And they had hoped that at some point in the future, they could resell it at a mark to market value where it wouldn't be less than what they paid for it or what it was worth. That never happened. I mean, they only got the 2.5% interest rates. They didn't even get the 5%, right?
Yeah.
And then everything blew up last September. It's like everyone forgot about that. The repo was in September. What happened in September?
Something in the piping burst.
Yeah, the repo, something. And to this day, I don't think anyone's really sure what were the specifics about that, why they had to, what hole the initial hole that they were plugging, where did that initiate from? I have a suspicion it had something to do with Deutsche Bank.
How about the LIBOR situation? That last spring, summer was the initial rollout of them having to, roll over into different overnight lending mechanisms outside of LIBOR because the threat of it shutting down this year, next year. So do you think that had anything to do with it as well?
Sure. With any particular situation, there's always more than one factor involved.
Yeah.
Have you ever driven a motorcycle?
I bought one, attempted to, but never really got around to riding it.
Did you take the class?
I never took the class. I bought the bike to learn how to ride and crashed it twice and just got rid of it. So
I bring that up because it's been so long. I learned how to drive when I was 15 and a half, right? And I don't remember if during the driving class, if they covered this specific thing I'm going to bring up, but I got my motorcycle license less than 10 years ago. And I was very proud of that. And I got through the class, drove through the Rocky Mountains. It was awesome. But what I learned in that class was there's always more than one reason for an accident.
Yeah.
It's never just one reason. It's multiple things come together and converge, and then boom, it happens. And what might set that off may be one thing because you were looking in the wrong direction, but that didn't stop the rest of the factors from occurring.
Yeah.
The accident might have happened even if you didn't turn away. So with banking and this whole thing, there's always more than one issue that's coming into play that's causing these problems. So just like with this pandemic, there was a bubble, right? We all knew there was a bubble in pretty much all the assets. Everything was ready to blow. No one was really sure what that quote unquote black swan was going to be, but we knew it was coming. And the pandemic was the pin. So who's going to bail out the Fed? I don't think Jim Rickards was suggesting the IMF because they had the cleanest balance sheet on the planet. And they could multiply those SDRs as necessary, and that tied into a whole global currency reset. But he's actually mentioned recently he's changed his tune on that because they have some issues which have come along because of the pandemic. And I don't remember specifically what they are. So I think that's why we're looking at more of a global currency reset situation / debt jubilee.
Yeah.
And in what shape or form it will initially end up, we got a lot to go through before we get there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. So here's a question out there for Mr. Low Blood Pressure. It says, the dollar says the dollar. Why do central banks need bailouts? Question mark. They create money from nothing, infinite money in the first place. Ultimately,
the banks aren't being bailed out right now. Let's get this straight. The banks were the global financial system was bailed out in 2008, 2009. And it was triggered. There was more than one reason. There was a convergence of trends that were occurring. But the pin that popped the need for that bailout was that money was there was an electronic run on the banks and the money markets. There were trillions disappearing overnight. Mm-hmm. And they had to stop that flow. Otherwise, it was going to collapse the plumbing of the whole global financial system. That's where the idea came in that the banks were bailed out because, technically, okay, you could say that they were. And everyone complained that, well, what about Main Street? What about average Joe and Jane? What about us? Yeah. So now what we have, the banks aren't being bailed out here. Maybe those repo operations were maintaining liquidity in the system for whatever issue that came up. Mm-hmm. We don't really sure what that was. But now, Main Street's being bailed out, actually. Small businesses matter of fact, they're being bailed out and they're saying, you don't even have to pay us back.
Yeah.
Right? As long as you do what you're supposed to do with this money that you're taking out on a loan, and it's got an interest rate attached to it, but in 90 days or whatever the layout is, you don't have to pay it back if you do the right thing.
And watch this. That's interesting that 75% of the funds is supposed to go towards your payroll with another quarter towards operations costs or whatever. And so another thing is, okay, so if corporations are supposed to use that within an 8-week time frame or 3-month time frame, whatever, to pay their payroll, it keeps those employees compensated while not working really. But yet, do they still get unemployment as well on top of that, or do those millions of people not fall into the unemployment side of things, or can they get both?
You can get both. And there's somebody in the chat. I want to say something. The central banks don't create fiat, by the way. The Treasury Department creates fiat because they employ the central bank. Let's just get that straight. But yeah, you could be an employee. Let's say your company closed down and you're an employee and you qualified for benefits. Yeah, You're getting that extra. Plus, you got the $1,200 check. That's my point. Main Street's being bailed out, and now that's not good enough either. It's like, okay, you got it both ways. You're getting what you were complaining that you didn't get before, but now that's not good enough, and it's the bank's fault again. Hey, look, there has to be some kind of banking system. Crypto's not the solution because you still have the exchanges. Those are literally the banks. They're doing the exchange. So it's in a different form, but it's the same concept. That's why some of them go under when the price gets too low because they go out of business, right? Yeah. The banks too. The bank's balance sheet don't work out. They either file for bankruptcy or they get bailed out. But remember, the plan was not to bail out Main Street because the pandemic was a black swan event. It was expected, but we didn't realize that it was when it was going to happen. Okay. Yeah. It was supposed to be a bail-in. Remember bail-in? Yeah. The legislation was passed in Canada, the United States, and Europe. It first started in Cyprus. And that was, they actually confiscate for instance, they can confiscate the deposits from your savings accounts and bail out the financial system. So I think the semantics here can be really important. Yeah. Now this isn't even a bail-in. This is not a bailout, but it is a bailout of Main Street because of a black swan. But the debt is so big, it's not even possible. And it wasn't possible before this happened. But remember, the whole plan was from 2008 was, well, the economy will improve to such a point that we'll be able to get this crap off our books and sell it at a mark-to-market price reality, but the economy had to improve enough in order to make that reality, and it actually never happened. They were hoping it was going to happen, but it never happened. So I don't know what you call this besides bailing out Main Street and how high they're going to go with it, but with the debt being so high, I don't think it matters what they print. But I think some of the moral questions are really important, like that bill you brought up, and government control and monitoring us, literally breaking into your house to pull you out and go quarantine you somewhere. I mean, that's like what was going on in China in December and January and February.
Yeah.
That's a problem. I'd be more worried about that than I would about the Fed right now, quite frankly. I think those concerns are a little misplaced.
Yeah, I would agree, because in mentioning that about coming into your home and what you're referring to is that bill. I'll put it on the screen again. And so that HR 666 and just how vague it is, but yet it means it has so much underlying meaning behind the service that we're not, aware of, apart from what we gather based upon our information we have. But I would imagine coming into, if it came to coming into your house to grab you if you were whatever, the people who are labeled troublemakers, alternative media individuals, would probably fall into that category, because there's no way of being able to distinguish who has it, who doesn't, who what. Because at that point, when they come in, if they come in, it's just to grab whatever they intended to come in to actually go get. So that's I think the biggest issue is that they may be looking to grab people who have nothing to do with the health situation. They just want to silence that person. So,
that's scary. This worries me more. Like, I'm just repeating myself, but this worries me more than the debt in the Fed or any of that, because I think we're so beyond paying it back or figuring it out that the global currency's reset and debt jubilee on some level is coming down the road.
Yeah.
So we really need to be paying attention to what the politicians are doing and how they're using this crisis, some factions of it, because the same thing happened with the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
After 9/11, right? They just forced that thing through.
Yeah.
This is a touchy subject.
Now watch this. I was going to, before we got back to that, I was going to talk about negative rates, because just yesterday, somebody in the White House commented saying that, it might be time for the Federal Reserve, or we might support that if the Federal Reserve decides to go negative. And so negative rates, because I know the bail-in concept is is still in play. I think they're adding more to their playbook as a part of the toolkit. And so if they do go negative, therefore, that's going to be more of a pinch on the higher net worth individuals first before it gets to the smaller deposits. But that's more of a clamp down on actually being able to withdraw physical cash, I would assume, because people will definitely realize that they're already losing at this current moment. They're going to really be losing if they get to that point. So do you think negative rates will eventually kick in as a response to more of the erosion of our economy?
I don't want to ruin the party, but we've been in negative rates for some time. The only difference is the difference between real and fantasy.
Yeah.
Mark the market or mark the fantasy. Look, mark the market, take the rate of inflation and subtract it from the interest rates. That was the Fed funds rate going back how many years? Not very many, but we've been in real negative interest rate territory for some time. So, everyone's looking at, the official rate. Yeah. Is that kind of like the official rate of inflation? Because depending on which rate of inflation you're looking at or which employment metric you're looking at, it's a lot higher than the so-called numbers that they're putting out there to the public. So for the sake of answering the question on the quote-unquote official numbers, the futures are already pricing it in for January. So that was one of the catalysts for gold having a nice spike on Thursday, or was it Friday? It was Thursday. Along with, I think everyone kind of overlooked this, but Trump administration announced they're pulling out Patriot missile batteries and troops out of Saudi Arabia. Now that's a big deal because that's all about the petrodollar deal from the 70s. Because that, will protect you as long as, you trade the dollars, the oil in dollars and buy your treasuries, blah, blah, blah. So that whole paradigm is blowing up too at the same time. There's like so much going on. This is more than a traffic accident. There's so many things converging together at one time. It's hard to keep track of it. And to focus on just one aspect of this is really missing the big picture. Just like, we've been in real negative rate territory for some time. So, hey, where's the party?
Yeah. Whoo, we saw. Here's the super chat from Jesse James. It says, "Forget the motorcycles, buy yourself a horse." So
I fell off a horse once. I gave him up.
I mean, it's been a while since I've got on one. I was a kid last time I tried. I'm not too big, but I'm too big. I'm not too comfortable getting on a horse at this point. But hey, Trader Steph, it's been great, man. We're approaching our hour point. I appreciate everybody chiming in and sharing their 2 cents in the chat or whatnot. So yeah, and one of the biggest takeaways from this is that there's so many things to focus on. It's hard to do it all. You'll stress yourself out. Oh man, this is a time that I try to focus on getting into the Word of God a little bit more often to build up my spiritual bank account a little bit more, because there's all this stuff goes well beyond me. I can't control or talk about it all, but can control my mindset and deposit into my spirit account a little bit. So any last thoughts you want to leave us with before we sign off for this afternoon chat?
Yeah, I second your final thoughts there, definitely. And, focus on what's important with you. I mean, get your house in order, get your debt in order if you can. Stock up on those supplies that you actually use. Just be prepared for whatever may come, particularly in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And with those things that you would end up using anyway, don't go crazy. And just be prepared. So it's better to be prepared than being a deer in headlights. And you'll be fine. We'll get through this. I think we're going to get through this, but it's going to be a rough ride. Yeah.
So on the screen here, I have tradersteph.com, and I'll share that via the chat. And then also I noticed that as I scroll through the website, the American Eagle, 1 ounce gold proof coin, $2,300, huh?
Nice price. That was like last week. Yeah, it's probably up a little higher right now.
2,300. Wow. So yeah, only going to go higher from here. So get your weight up while you still can on that back end. But anyway, everybody's been great hanging out. Thanks for joining us, and definitely looking forward to getting back at it next week with more subject matter the same. And I'm trying to switch up a little bit stuff and get into more good news. And so I'm trying to, as I start off my little live streams, I asked the caller, to share some good news with me. And a lot of people are like, they have to think for a second, because we've been so focused on the situation we're facing that we tend to forget there is good news amongst all this. So that's my way of trying to get people to, divert from their attention from the bad side of things all the time. But
yeah, something really good's going to come out of this whole mess. I think we really need to focus on that, on what that possibility might be. So good point.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, be blessed, be safe. I will see you guys later. Enjoy your day.